Yo, 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 yo. Hopefully you guys had a good Christmas and are not writing 2023 on dates anymore because it's in fact 2024. We are all a year older. But yep, we have the best season coming up here for Supercross that I am incredibly stoked for. Make some analysis videos, get some good people together, talk about some privateers, do what we can to help grow the sport. And I could go on and digress, but we know I was late to the show. So let's bring in our guests. And we have Coach, as always. And we've got Travis with Moto Aftermath, who has in fact built his YouTube and his podcast. He's doing pretty well this year. So appreciate having you guys on board and joining us this morning. And dude, Travis, I do have to apologize that I gave you the wrong time yet again, because I'm not the most detail-oriented person. And I'm all like, yeah, we're starting the show at Pacific time. And he's like, Johnny, do you mean Eastern? And I'm like, no, Pacific time. And he's like, well, Pacific time was a couple hours ago. You mean Eastern? And I'm like, yeah, I mean Eastern.
Well, if my life wasn't such a mess, it'd be way, way easier for me because basically with running my own business, and Johnny, you know this, I have customers in and out all the time. So I scheduled customers coming in thinking we were doing it at Eastern because that's what you told me the other day. And then your email this morning says Pacific time. And I'm like, what do I do? But I don't want customers showing up. So then I'm like, okay, well, I'll just reschedule them. But then you tell me it's East. It was a mess. It's okay. It's fine. We're good. We're all good. I may have to bow out for 2 seconds to, make some money, but it's whatever.
Yeah. If I'm going personal on some stuff, I had some people show up at my house yesterday because I'm trying to rent out my house, and they showed up an hour early. And I'm like, hey guys, you guys are here an hour early. They're like, no, we're not. We're here on time. And I look at my calendar and I'm going, no, you guys are an hour early. It's like, no, I think you put it on there wrong. And I'm like, fuck. Okay. All right. I bet I did put it there wrong because, dude, details, right? Well, what's the saying? The devil's in the details. I have no idea what that means, but damn, man, shit goes sideways when you get the details wrong. But we're talking about A1, and I want to kind of bring up the track map too, because this track actually looks like a good racing track. We have 2 whoop sections, and I'm hoping that they're going to actually build out a couple big sets of whoops here to where they're not super mellowed out. And I know we're going to have press day is actually going on right now, so the riders have been riding it. I'm sure we could look up and see exactly what the track actually looks like. But here you've got the 2 whoop sections, which I think are going to be the primary passing points, along with potentially some of the sand, and then of course the 180-degree corners, where the first one is probably going to happen after the start with a passing spot, and then a passing spot coming into the whoops is, I feel like, really is the only passing spots on this track besides the big rhythm, because this big old section is just fast in one line, and after the finish line is going to be fast in one line.
Do you think they'll make those whoops intimidating, or do you think because it's first round they want everybody to get through it? What do you think?
I personally think that they're going to make them smaller because of it being first round. I don't think they're wanting to intimidate a crap ton of people, because if I look at if I look at the 450 class, there is 60 entries in the 450 class. And what I found, they added more. So now there is 41 entries as opposed to 39 the other day. But pretty much only one guy is not going to make the night show tomorrow. I thought it was interesting that for the stepping stone class that nobody wants to show up and race a 250.
Yeah. Well, think about that 250 class. It's so hard to be competitive in it, especially with the 250 with the teams filling up pretty much the entire gate with factory bikes in that 250 class. I do find it interesting that Star only put 2 bikes on the West Coast. But anyway,
Wait, I have info.
let's hear it.
So the big debacle here has been Deegan not riding west, right? But supposedly there's breaking news this morning that he has a wrist injury, and that's why he's not riding west.
Imagine that. Nobody knowing about that until the very last minute. And of course,
there's rumors it might be bad enough he's not going to ride till outdoors, but I don't know. I literally found this out like a half an hour ago as I was driving in. So
yeah,
we'll see as the days progress here.
Who broke the news, Travis?
So supposedly Mathis has it on it, and I haven't looked at any of this. I got a text message that said Deegan wrist, that's the issue. And then I asked a couple follow-up questions. Supposedly Mathis's Twitter has something about it, and then there was somebody else's Twitter had some, maybe Daniel Blair's Twitter has some cryptic stuff about like waiting for Paula or something. Sorry, I know I'm on my phone and that's terrible, but
no, you're good.
It's all part of getting the information.
It's actually,
but Johnny, your point was well taken though. Opening round, and we can't use the excuse of attrition and injuries. Here we are, first round on the West Coast. It's not like you're starting, in some remote part of the country. So yeah, it definitely makes you wonder what kind of tone does that set for the very beginning. You could always argue people are still trying to shake down the program, but I don't know. You saw that your buddy, or with Trav's buddy Morantz, you saw his sequence of photos that he was loading that van up. I mean, the best privateers in the world, they're able to make it. So with the exception, I think there's 3 guys. Colt Nichols is out with a shoulder injury. There's really no excuse for there to be a very anemic registration for this first opening round. I thought it was pretty interesting you brought that up this week on your track walk.
Yeah, no, it's crazy how many guys are injured here. We've got Aaron Tanti here. How do I do this?
He just announced he got injured yesterday too.
Yeah, in a whoop section.
Of course, the bike gets him on the backside. Watch it again. Boom!
He is so good at
what happened.
That
it looks like he got kicked off the foot pegs.
I'd say it looks like his feet just came off the back of the bed because his feet went backwards. Watch it. As he hits the second one, his feet are off the back.
I've never seen his feet a guy do freestyle motocross on a whoop section. That's insane.
Watch his feet slip off the back, though.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, but did he miss one whoop because his rear end ends up sliding?
Yeah, he does. His front misses like the second or third one in if you watch it.
All right, Aaron. Does he miss this second one? Yep, he misses the second one. So then the front end's gonna hit much lower,
and then the rear end just plucks.
Actually, he didn't miss much lower, but still, that was bad. I can't find anything saying on Steve-O's Twitter. And man, I need to get on Twitter. Twitter's just so hard to follow up with. There's so much posting that you need to go on.
Well, there's just too much. There's just too many platforms anymore. You got people messaging you, leaving you messages on YouTube. You got DMs on Instagram. You got email.
I mean, we all
text
do.
Message.
Yeah, but are you guys on X?
No. Well, I shouldn't say that.
Somebody else handle that. I don't touch that thing.
Yeah, I'm with you, Johnny. I could never figure out how to engage with it properly. Like you try to respond to it or whatever. But then again, it's been probably 8-10 years. Our IT guy has it set up that if I put something on, I think on Instagram or Facebook, it pushes to X, but I don't manage it at all.
Yeah.
It's just, we're at a point nowadays where there's just too many ways. And inevitably, somebody will leave me a message on YouTube. See, I do try to really follow the YouTube comments because most of those are usually engaging, where on the other social media platforms, usually somebody's just being a smart aleck. They just use it as an opportunity to kind of take a cheap shot. But you just get to a point where you have to narrow down where are you going to engage. We have 11 email addresses with our various companies. And then you have each one of our divisions has its own Instagram channel. So you have DMs coming in those. Then you have your regular text messages. It's just, so I just find that you can't keep up with them. But that's the only reason why I don't do X.
I'm just too controlling. And so it's hard to delegate and finding somebody to get the actual personality out there.
Yeah.
So,
Johnny, did
and
you ever watch that video I sent you about the social media thing? Like that one company that does it? Coach, I didn't send it to you. I sent it to Johnny. This guy was talking about how they do big influencers. And I mean, to even get into this company, there's a waiting list. I think it's like you got to make $2 million or more in a year and have over 300,000 followers already.
yeah, well, they charge like 200,000 or something for their services too.
Yeah, but they were talking that they'll put a team on your social, and you'll have 10 to 20 accounts, all directing back to your main account, and then they'll post between like 3,000 to 5,000 times a month across everything. And it just blew my mind, because I was like, yeah, there's no way that you could do that without having a team like that or a management company like that, because that's just insane. But I guess that's the level you have to be at now to be those super out there people. So,
but
yeah,
what would you, let's say that we own that company and we're put on to Johnny's account or yours, Trav. What are they going to post 3,000 to 5,000 times about in our bit? Well, I shouldn't say that with you guys, because you could go.
They're going to reuse content, is what they're going to do.
I just answered my own question, because like Trav, you're still putting pictures up from the summer and getting tremendous traffic. You know, like whether it's Deegan going full send mode or whatever. But like in my stuff, and we talk about this in our staff meetings all the time, I can't, like I've been asked, why don't I have a frequently asked questions section on my website? Well, you got to think about the email I'll get is, hey, I have a spiral fracture of tib fib. What should I do? How do you automate that response? You know, hey, I can cuss myself. When can I get back to riding? Hey, I hit the ground yesterday. Should I use ice or heat?
I got the answer for you.
Please talk to me.
The answer is just auto response. Here's a link. Here's my pet program. Go here. Just auto response for everything.
Well, it's funny you say that, because we do use autoresponders for a lot of the fulfillment of resources that people request. But when it comes to Trav, you've kind of piqued my interest, because I've looked at services, whether it's Hootsuite or whatever, and the biggest challenge you run into is the questions that come in. And Johnny,
don't use Hootsuite. So the algorithms will pick up on it. You have to, what I found out is that, and this part of this was in that video I sent Johnny, is you have to actually legitimately be on the platform. So for example, the algorithm's so good now that if you have an Instagram that all you do is go on there, post your picture real quick and get off, it will not push your stuff. You have to actually spend time. So like part of that big company push that they do is the people actually have your profiles, and they will actually scroll for you too for X amount of time per day per profile. Like, I mean, the stuff they were talking about was crazy. And when you talk about like, how do you post that much? Well, if you have obviously the basics, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it.
Snapchat, guys. Snapchat is
the leader. But then they were also talking, like, they went as deep as like, so for example, on YouTube, you would have your main YouTube page, which is something I'm looking into now. And then you would have, like they have with the Joe Rogan stuff, so you would have like your clips page, your segments page, and all your shorts page, and all that pushes back to like the main page. Like it's really wild when you think about it.
It's funny how we're not talking about racing. Travis, I don't mean to interrupt you, but some of the guys in the chat room are talking about why riders are getting injured before the season starts. So here's a 2-point question. It's a double barrel loaded question. Okay. First one is, why are riders getting injured before they're racing? And then 2, speculation. Do you think that the 2024 Supercross, we're going to see the attrition rate be just as bad as what it was last year, to where motocross doesn't have that many guys? Ready, set, fire, go.
I've got the answer to the first one. Supercross is dangerous.
And motocross is not, you know, it's like racing go-karts. It's super easy, super safe. It's answer the second question, Trav, since you answered the first one so eloquently.
Sorry, what was the second question? I completely
The second
forgot.
question is, do you believe that we're going to see a good portion of the top tier riders be out at some point because of 17 rounds of Supercross, or do you think nobody's going to get hurt? I mean, what is your feeling?
So it's a great question, and I don't really have a solid answer for it because we've seen something that we talked about a lot on our preview show, which is like this vet rider mentality now. We call it Team VRM, which is these guys actually picking up on, hey, I don't have to go balls out all the time. We saw it with Jet all summer racing, going 22-0 outdoors. Where he won everything because obviously he has the skills to do it. There were points where he wasn't leading, and we didn't see him freak out or go like, say, old school Eli Tomac beast mode where he was 30 seconds a lap faster. And we didn't even see him do it then once he got the lead. He literally would get the lead and just run like a very mature pace and win by 3-4 seconds, which is why everyone kind of downplays that 22-0 season, because he wasn't Stu, who was like, I'm going to stay on the gas, beat everybody by a minute just to show them who's daddy. So I'm not sure if the vet rider mentality like takes over this year and we see less attrition compared to like last year, because like part of that too was, I mean, if you look at the Austrian bikes, I believe caused some issues. You look at like Mookie, you look at Craig, that kind of stuff, like Barsha. I mean, it's ironic that all the Austrian bike guys had issues there and were out by the end of the season, even down to Webb. I mean, yeah, Webb's was kind of just a weird tip over thing with like getting hit by AC by accident. But still, you look at all that, it was all Austrian bikes there that were a big issue, I guess you'd call it, for top guys being out.
Well, there's a lot of Jap bikes as well that were injured. You know, like Hunter Lawrence on his Honda got hurt, and that pretty much, he had that injury all through outdoors with his back, and then it ended up becoming such a problem for Super Motocross that he lost potentially $500,000 because of an injury he sustained in Supercross, right?
Yeah.
And then you got Tomac. Then at some point I guess this doesn't super count, but it was close enough to where it was basically the end of Supercross. Sexton ended up getting, like, there's plenty of Jap guys. Jason Anderson, you know, gosh, did he break his neck? I think he broke his neck, you know, so
I don't remember.
Maybe you will
Look,
have
I'll take the L on the Austrian brand thing, okay?
No, because a lot of guys said that they didn't really like the chassis. You know, they were saying the chassis was too stiff and the suspension setup wasn't right. And I guess my point that I'm saying is, when you have everybody pushing the envelope, you end up pushing the envelope as well. And then if you don't really believe in the equipment that you're riding, or it's subpar, well, now you're just pushing yourself into more of a red zone of potentially shit to go wrong. And I don't know if I'm answering my own question is exactly what you said with, hey, it's Supercross is super dangerous. I mean, you've got a lot of privateers that have just injured themselves in practice crashes too. I mean, I think Bobby Piazza, he tore his Achilles tendon too practicing for Supercross. So there's a lot of guys that end up getting hurt trying to implement race pace to get ready for A1. And then throughout the season, you're going to have guys that have some sort of a crash and they have an injury that doesn't have time to heal, and they got to just keep going 17 rounds. So they Band-Aid it, and then eventually they have to pull themselves out. It's unfortunate. And the only way I really see it changing is if these guys had more of an MXGP or a World Supercross schedule, not where it's 4 races, but it was something like 2 weeks every other race or something, to where it gave some guys, so if they needed to miss 2 races, that's a month off where they could really recoup, where Supercross doesn't have that.
Now, Coach, I got a question for you from the physical side of things, okay? And Johnny just triggered this in my mind. So these guys go out and it's lap time battle at the test track. Do you think that is really necessary to be a top guy at this point? Because I know with like some of the other sports like marathons or triathlons or whatever, like Johnny just did, like you don't train at your absolute max every single day, 4 days a week, 5 days a week, whatever it is, and then go do your triathlon or your marathon or anything. You basically build to it. So is this like a misstep that like everybody's just been overlooking for years, as far as like, hey, we're going to go out and you got to be, you know, half a second faster today, and then what ends up happening is exactly what we're seeing is we run into this attrition rate the week before the season starts?
Well, there's a lot of meat on the bone that both of you guys have posed in front of everybody. The first question that Johnny had asked falls right in line with what you're saying. And Travis, I do have to agree with you. When you look at Christian Craig and Malcolm Stewart are both known to be so aggressive in the whoops. And when they went to that Husky platform, both of them got hurt in the whoops. So I do have to agree with you that that platform bit them in the ass pretty hard. And then you look at, you know, Volan never seemed to really cooperate with the 250 platform at KTM. We know Webb didn't, and we know that Sexton really wasn't a big fan of it because he was already riding the Honda. The other way around. Coming back to your question, Trav, you're 100% correct, but this is what makes motocross and supercross, I think, one of the coolest sports in the world. This is strictly my opinion, but what I've seen over the last 38 years is when you make a comment, marathoners don't run a marathon every day, and they don't run it at race pace every single day. Our week of training, sometimes our elite runners will run twice a day. Every time they run, it's not wide open at race pace or even slightly faster. But here's where motocross and supercross is so cool. Our suspension does not work unless it's at full race pace. Unfortunately, this is what hurt Ian Treadle, right? You're going out and you're doing a sight lap. That suspension is designed to be under full acceleration, under full load. And if it doesn't, it becomes pogo sticks. So all of a sudden you hit a little kicker. The suspension the bike isn't going fast enough to get the suspension to do what it's supposed to do. So instead of absorbing it, what does it do? It'll kick. And then that's where we see a lot of these unnecessary injuries. So coming back full circle to your question though, Trav, we as athletes that enjoy motocross and supercross, in my opinion, and you already articulated it, I just want to reframe it. The top guys should not be riding at high intensities for more than 2 consecutive days in a row. So for example, if you take a top runner, he's going to do speed work on Tuesday, hill work on Thursday, long run on the weekend. Everything else is maintenance in between. So if you're working with a supercross rider, or a motocross rider for that matter, on the days, the days that need to be low intensity, that's when you work turn track. That's when you keep your wheels on the ground because you're always able to keep the heart rate much lower. Now, when you go and you ride supercross, the quadriceps, the muscles between your knees and your hips, they're the largest consumer of oxygen in the body. So on a day that you're going to go work extremely rough sections and you're going to be working whoops, that has to be deemed as a high intensity day. Everything else should be over here working around in an area where what you're doing is you're just working skills and drills. You're working cornering. You're working step-ons and step-offs coming out of a corner. What you're trying to avoid is getting the heart rate elevated. Because if you look at what the definition of overtraining is doing more than you can absorb. So if you do 3 consecutive days and the heart rate's high, sweat rate is high. What I mean by sweat rate is most people think of high sweat rate as you're losing electrolytes through your sweat. You're right. But you also have to remember, if you're sweating more, that means you're burning more calories as well. So that's where it becomes a double-edged sword. When the heart rate average, and this is why we use the Garmin, when the heart rate average is extremely high, that means the calorie burn rate is high. We have some athletes, 7,000 calories is what they'll burn on a day at the track. 7,000 calories. So think about that. If an extra large egg has 75 calories, can you imagine? We've done enough research. We know that when you go ride supercross and you're going to have a day of 7,000, and I can share with you a Garmin dashboard that validates this number. If you have a day that you're burning 7,000 calories, that's the equivalent of right at 100 extra large eggs. So imagine that tomorrow you're going to go ride Supercross, and we know that your calorie burn rate, let's just say you do it's what we call race day simulation. You go through practice, you go through qualifiers, you go through the main event, and then you repeat that. Well, let's just say that we know we're going to do that again tomorrow. And you walk out in the morning and I have 100 extra large eggs stacked on the kitchen counter. That's what your calorie burn rate is going to be. It's not whether I think it's accurate or not. We know it's accurate because you wear the heart rate monitor. So Trav, coming full circle back to your question, no. Nobody should train balls to the wall every single day. You definitely shouldn't do it consecutive days. No other sport does. So now you have to take it and add a new dynamic to it. Are the athletes able to eat enough? The answer is no. Are the athletes able to replace the sweat rate sufficiently? The answer is no. If you don't eat enough and you're not properly hydrated, you're not going to be able to sleep with any level of quality. You might lay in bed for 9 hours, but that doesn't mean that you're actually absorbing. That's why we always say the definition of overtraining is not how much you do, but how much you can absorb. So for example, if I have a professional triathlete that does 35 hours a week, what people don't see is the other side of the equation. This is somebody who swims, bikes, runs, lifts, and does that for 35 hours a week. But he or she is also sleeping 12 hours a night and gets a 2-hour nap. Now, it's not the most glorious life because pretty much you're either eating, sleeping, or training. That's pretty much it. Come back to the first question that Johnny had asked. Why are athletes getting hurt? Because of the question that you just declared, Travis. These guys are going too many consecutive days, balls to the wall, and I will sit and have an adult conversation with anybody who wants to discuss, does the facility mindset, is that productive or counterproductive? I think we've seen it's very counterproductive. It leads to a high level of burnout, leads to a high rate of injury. And then this segues to the second question that Johnny had. Do we think that we'll see the high attrition rate? Well, yes. And here's the thing to keep in mind. Every single one of these top guys that we're seeing, and this is going to be a double negative, and if it doesn't make sense, I hope you guys will say something so I can clarify it. Anybody who got injured last year is going to have a better chance of coming in fresher this year because they were injured and they were forced to take time off. Anybody who finished the entire series last year, they don't have, if you break a season into what we call periodization, most of the guys didn't have a legitimate preseason. That preseason could be 12 to 16 weeks long where you're working on maximum strength, maximum aerobic function. And those guys didn't have it because the season went almost to the end of the calendar year. And then they had to get ready to go right into the beginning of the new season. The people who got hurt are the ones that are going to be sitting in the best position coming into this year. But unfortunately, the way that they train during the week, and because Johnny, you mentioned it earlier, and I've said it on the show before, I work with Mike Witowski with Phoenix Honda. He is the #1 pro for the GNCC side of things, and their schedule makes sense. They race every other weekend. So think about this. Mike races on Sunday. We can rest till Wednesday, maybe even Thursday if his body needs it. You can train for 7 consecutive days, Wednesday to Wednesday. Then you can do a 3-day taper. And you have a lot less guys that are getting hurt, burnt out, and injured on the GNCC side. And I don't want to get into the greed thing, but that's what it boils down to. No one in their right mind would say, hey, what's a good idea? Let's extend the series, which, by the way, there's been some recent talking pundits that have tried to indirectly throw us under the bus because they say that we badmouth the series. I'm not badmouthing the series. We're just regurgitating. And Trav, you're very good friends with Morantz. What did he think about a race season that was literally 9.5, 10 months long? I mean, it's not that we're throwing it under the bus, but Major League Baseball doesn't play for 11 months. Football doesn't play for 11 months. Hockey, basketball. Why? Because people come to see the stars.
The evolution of the sport, right? The riders that I've talked to, yeah, they would love to have less time on the track and have more time to spend with family and like recover and whatnot. And like some of the factory guys that I've talked to, yeah, they're programs, just like you said, coach, is once the race season starts, they're not really trying to get faster. That work should have been done previously, but they're just kind of trying to maintain and then go hard on the weekend, and they're able to fly and they don't have to travel where the privateer is how do I get faster? And then also I'm going to eat like shit on the road, and I'm going to drive. And then I show up at the race, and, you know, it's hard to expect 100% perfection when you're really not taking care of all your P's and Q's. But then there is some guys that are trying to get faster during the season, and that puts them in a compromised position to where they could make a mistake on the weekend because they have some sort of gnarly practice crash or whatnot. So the guys that really do well are guys that follow your ideology. And with the sport, the sponsors need that many races to justify what they're spending for the sport. They want as much time in front of the viewers. And the riders I've talked to is they would rather race less and get paid the same, but because they're getting paid a little bit more, they're like, cool, I don't mind. We can show up and we can go racing. And my personal take on it is, yeah, it would be awesome if there was less racing for the riders, but as a viewer, gosh, I would like to just see more and more racing pretty much all the time. But that's basically what we have with World Supercross coming in, MXGP, and also the wrong one. I was actually trying to remove Travis. There we go. Travis is out. He is SOL right now. But as a viewer, I want to see more racing. That's kind of what they've given us, but it's at the expense of the riders. And so,
Yeah,
not that
but think about that though, Johnny, because then halfway through the season last year, what was everybody complaining about? The stars weren't on the starting gate. So what, would you rather get 100% of something or 100% would you rather get 40% of something or 100% of nothing? And I think that's the part that makes it so difficult. Look at the success of the MXGPs. Look at the numbers of people that go to those races. And then look at Caroli, who's made a tremendous amount of money and has had a very extensive career. And it's not because he raced every weekend. And this is where.
Well, Coach, I think, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think we're at a pivotal point in the sport where we're going to see an exponential growth in the next 5 years or so. And I think a lot of it has to do with social media. Is how do they convince Peacock? Like, it took them forever to have Peacock mend with motocross and supercross. And so they had to sell it. And then they had to compete against World Supercross. So they added 3 races, but removed 1. But with the implementation of social media, we've seen it with Twitter having pretty much owning the most views ever of a live stream over any other news program. When Tucker Carlson was talking with Trump, is he proved that you don't need a big brick and mortar place to get the views for stuff. And I think my channel and your channel and everyone else's channel prove that we can obtain a good audience with relatively a lower budget on some stuff. And so I think we're going to see a more gradual transformation to more social media streaming stuff rather than being handcuffed to MSNBC. Who owns Peacock? Is it MSNBC or is it NBC?
NBC.
Are they
I
the same
think
people?
I think they're all the same. MSNBC and NBC.
Yeah, NBC is the parent company, NBC Universal or whatever. So technically, it's Universal Media or whatever it's called.
But truthfully, I don't know what contract they signed. The people that I've talked to have just said, like, hey, the reason as to why there's so many freaking races is because that's what Peacock said. In order for us to give you the camera equipment and whatever, this is what we need to do. And typically, I know those type of companies don't do deals unless it's like, hey, we're going to do a 5-year deal or more, which helps the sport out because then they don't have to go look for something else. But in the background, I would be looking at transitioning to potentially YouTube TV or some other platform, having it on Twitter, something where you can get a little bit more audience. Because I know I'm digressing a lot, guys, but honestly,
no, you're not at
I
all.
really liked when Mav TV fucked up. When Mav TV fucked up and nobody could get the app to work, they just streamed it straight from their YouTube account. And I honestly loved having the 1,000 people in there for the chat, everyone bench racing. Like, I thought that was a lot of fun. If they could do that for Supercross and everything, like how much retention rate people look forward to to talking about racing and doing exactly what we're doing right here. So
Yeah, I have to come back. I feel like we get a little bit too short-sighted because when the season got extended and it was more of a counter ambush to the World Supercross, I think it was very interesting how the narrative got spun. And Johnny, unfortunately, I feel like you've drank a little bit too much from the cup. And that is the idea that they're justifying an extended series, which only causes our athletes to be exhausted and burnt out. We're not being negative. We're not even speculating anymore because we saw it manifest itself last year. It didn't take very long before half the field was obliterated. And so to turn right back around and duplicate the same format that we saw, because I think it answers the question that you posed. Do we think we're going to see this a carbon copy of what we saw last year? Yeah, I do. We're dealing with human beings, not robots. And again, I'm gonna say this because I had a huge smile on my face and was laughing out loud when I watched and listened to a couple other people talk on other podcast shows about you should be thankful that there's more racing. I'm thankful that there's more racing, but if you really want to get strip all the emotion out of it, the athletes have not asked for more racing. What the athletes have asked for is a chance to make more money. So where the professionals have spun the narrative, well, you want more money? We'll give you more money, but we're going to double the amount of races that you guys have to do to get the money. And then we're going to pretty much throw handcuffs on you that the only way to be eligible for the end of season money that we're throwing out there, which again, everybody's joked about it. Where did all that newfound money come from? We've heard people that say, hey, look, we've carried the sport on our shoulders long enough. We need to start making some money. They justify poaching sponsors from teams and putting them on the sidelines.
yeah, well, the majority of that money came from Peacock, right? That was the deal.
I don't know. That's what we're told. I don't know.
I mean, I guess
supposedly Peacock or NBC is paying out a lot of that money, but
yeah,
okay,
I thought,
but
at least from what they
problem.
told, is it was like $7 million from Peacock, and then
I want to see a closed
the other $3 between Feld and MX Sports.
But I want to see a closed door meeting with the CEO of Peacock, and you tell him or her that out of 20 factory riders, we have 6 that are on the starting gate, and we're not seeing as many people in the stadiums because they're the person that they, the show has come to town and they want to see and meet and greet their rider, and the rider's not there, and people aren't tuning in because the law of attrition, right? And it's just one of those situations. Now, again, I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer. I'm just going off of the things that I've heard from people who they couldn't wait for the race to come to town, only to find out that their favorite rider's injured. So they don't even go to the race because they're not sure if the rider's going to show up or not going to show up. So that's the thing that I'm always curious about is, what if World Supercross, let's say those investors didn't come back around? How quickly, because we already know that the MX Sports and the Feld Motorsports Group, they're just putting on their best behavior, right? They're trying to show that they can coexist and they can get along with one another. And what do they say? The mother of invention is what? Necessity. So had the World Supercross not come around, and again, I've heard some people that, again, if you can read between the BS,
yeah,
they're
Coach,
saying that these.
I'm interrupting you. So
okay.
Finish what you're saying. Essentially, what is I get your argument. It's the whole capitalism. When you have a competition,
I love capitalism.
Yeah,
I love capitalism.
So this is just.
It's not capitalism as much as it is a game of charades.
But I think this isn't necessarily just our sport that we're seeing this. Motorsports in general, they're trying to add more races in teams and drivers everywhere. I mean, if you look at F1 tries to add races every single year. And then basically the drivers come back and they're like, absolutely not. Like, we're not going to do anymore. And then I believe NASCAR is the same thing. Like NASCAR does the same thing. What did I see the other day? They do like 34 races a year or something, like the Nextel Cup Series or whatever it is now. And so like those guys too, I've heard lots of rumblings that they're like, yeah, no more. Like we don't want to go more than 34 weekends in a year. We want to have time off. And these are guys that, you can't really go drive a NASCAR track for practice on the weekend, nor is it like one of those things that is, I guess as dangerous as what we're doing. But yeah, I think it's just a motorsports thing in general. Like all of these promoters are trying to do more and more and more and more, and it's gonna take the athletes pushing back. Like until we get a point that the riders, even if they don't form the cursed word of a union, until the riders start pushing back on them and saying, look, we're not doing it, which again, I don't think will happen, because you've got the manufacturers are the biggest teams in our sport, and the manufacturers are tied to the series. I mean, they all talk about how they're partners.
You make a very good point, Travis, and you're right about the only way to get less races is the union. Because if the data shows that more races created more revenue and more people's retention rate watch the races, they're not going to care if they enjoyed it more or not. Like I know that motocross wasn't as exciting when you didn't have the top riders racing for it, but Jet sure still made a good season out of it with his battle with Sexton and the whole making it a perfect season. However, I think last year was sort of a beta test year for, hey, is this all working? And so this year, if the same thing happens, because I know we're talking about the injuries, if 80% of all the factory guys end up getting hurt again, well, then they're going to have to maybe go back to the drawing board and go, hey, how do we change this? But if not, then 2023 just goes down as a fluke year and they go about business, and these guys just have to race more and more and more. But that's why I love the options of the World Supercross of what they're doing, is it lets the rider now decide, hey, do I want to be a part of a series that does 33 races, or do I want to be a part of a series that does 4 to 8 races, And I love it. I absolutely love it. And again, from a viewer standpoint, just like what we talked earlier, Travis, you were talking about the social media guys where they hire a giant team to post 12 times a day. That's all the industry is doing, is they're like, let's have more races. We get more viewers out there and it can grow faster. Is it at the expense of the riders? Oh, hell yeah. It's at the expense of the riders. But the whole goal is they're getting paid a little bit more, and hopefully down the line, it ends up being advantageous for both sides, the business side and the professional side, if you want to call them circus monkeys or whatever. So I guess I'm more of leaning towards, I'm kind of in the middle here. And I know, Coach, we were disagreeing a little bit on it.
No. Excuse me. No, not at all. And for Sausage, I apologize if I've turned you off. And Michael, I don't mean to be Debbie Downer. My big thing is when you ask a question from the perspective of the athletes, I'm with Mike and I'm with everybody else in the chat room. I'd love to see a race every weekend for 52 weeks of the year. I love to race. I love to go moto.
But let them do steroids
but my thing is
that much.
when you guys ask,
truthfully.
No, when you guys ask questions, because I don't want the chat room to think I'm being Debbie Downer or anything.
No, there's other
like
people
that.
there saying that we love you, Coach. And
well, no, it's the question was, do we think there'll be a high level of attrition? The answer is yes. If you're asking why, it's because no human being can race competitively 45 to 50 weeks out of the year.
We all agree.
I'm just answering the question. Now, in regards to the politics that's behind it, I think what Travis said about NASCAR, and I hope the chat room will really pay attention. Did you hear Travis say the NASCAR Cup, Nextel Cup, whatever it's called? That right there surmises my entire opinion on the business side of it. Why has NASCAR struggled to get a top level sponsor? Because you started to see the attraction to the NASCAR racing is kind of fallen off, right? And when the attention and the excitement of the racing falls off, what happens to the sponsors? The sponsorship falls off. We've heard over and over again some of that. I think it was the Nextel sponsorship, and I think it's now the Monster, if I'm not mistaken. They're getting it for like pennies up. They're getting it for pennies on the dollar because the viewership, the numbers are not there. And here we are trying to find a way to raise more money in the sport. So please don't take me as a Debbie Downer. I just look at it from an entire economical model. And like you said, Johnny, the athletes are the show, so we can't dismiss that. We have to work within the parameters. We want the sport to grow. it isn't going to grow unless there's a high level of excitement, and there's not a high level of excitement without your key players. So I hope
Yeah,
that
and we
doesn't
need
come
more
across the wrong way.
analytics behind it because it was one season of a crap ton of racing, and
Mhm.
arguably Roxon did the most racing, but he didn't do the most, if that makes sense, because he
Mhm.
traveled the most. Before we get into talking about our top 5, right? We might have to go back to top 3 here because I do have a chat or a poll going about who's going to win A1. And yes, like the thumbnail says, I am a big Sexton believer, even though Travis disagrees with me in the chat room. So F you, Travis. We're no longer friends because we share different views. I'm kidding. Totally kidding. Look at this with the points. Now, 22nd place is making 0 points, where it's gone 25, 22.
This is a big
have
problem.
I have to look back at last year to see. Let me look up last year to see if that is true. But you make the main event, and if you get last, you get paid, but you make no points, which I find is interesting.
This is a big conversation thing this week because without getting points, you're basically getting $300 more than what the 5th place guy in the LCQ gets, and you got to go race and put 20 more minutes on your bike, 20 more minutes on the track, 20 more minutes of risk. And to top it all off, what I just found out yesterday, they're also paying all the way to 21st for outdoors now. Like they're giving points all the way to 21st.
What was it last year? What was it last year, Trav?
well, see,
Outdoors.
that's the thing is here. Let me look up because
So
for the longest,
outdoors is only supposed to pay points through the 20th position. Where Supercross always paid through 22nd. And no one seems to know exactly the reasoning behind it, other than they're trying to make everything the same all the way across, because obviously we're all one big kumbaya family now, indoors, outdoors, everything. But
well, I know I'm a big. I take apart both the rule books because things that don't stand in Supercross, they stand in motocross, and vice versa. And some of the conversations I've had with some of the owners, they've don't like that I've done that. But continue, keep going, Travis. I'm looking
please
for stuff.
inform me on some of these differences that you've talked about here, because I'm unaware of this. I don't have.
It was more or less is kind of the starting procedure about stuff. Like the big one was the whole, gosh, was it Washougal where Deegan was out front and
no, but Bud's Creek, but
Bud's
yes,
Creek,
okay.
yeah.
But they went back and fixed that, right? And it's
they
the
did.
same
They
across
have
both
changed
now,
the
right?
stuff, and I do think that our conversations on social media have helped gotten the stuff, regardless if it's true or not. I feel like as a collective community, we have spoken up about stuff and gotten things changed. So just the same thing with these points. If enough people piss and moan about it, they're going to change it. But here, you guys talk. I'm going to look to see the points layout from last year.
So Trav, what were you excuse me, what were you saying? Outdoors, they used to do points to 20th and now they're going to 21. Is that, did I hear you right?
So Supercross was always all 22, you got at least a point. And then outdoors was
20th.
all the way through 20th was all. So if you finished 21st, you didn't get a point. And now, like I said, they've made it the same across all realms there, and they've taken away the point from 22nd place in Supercross, which some of the rumors behind it is they're trying to do it to like punish the top guys if they have a DNF or whatever, you know. But man, there's a lot of blowback about, like, this has been big news since this dropped the other day that they were going to do this. And part of it too, they're saying, is because they went, so in Supercross the last few years, I don't know if you've paid this close of attention, Coach, they were given 26 points to the winner instead of 25 like they've done for years. So they were like, oh, it's cool, we can just walk it down to 1 point for 22nd. And now it's like, well, they're only doing 25, so they're not going to give out that last point. But like I said, this is a huge debacle because they're not going to hurt the factory guys that have the DNF. Like,
here's last year.
Oh, go ahead, Johnny.
No, I'm just on the screen. You just talk. I'm just showing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. 26.
So the factory guys, like, it's really not going to make a big difference. What you're hurting are all these privateer guys that work their ass off just to get in the main and try to stay healthy when the factory guys get hurt just to get in the main. And now those privateer guys aren't getting that point for getting 22nd. So what's the point of them really trying to get into the main? Like for $300 more, like $300 in today's money doesn't make that big of a difference really, to get in the main versus not getting in the main, especially when you factor in like risk and wear and tear on the bike, the body, all that kind of stuff. It's like, what's the point if you just know you're going to get 22nd, you know?
Well, and you don't get a national number if, you know, because it's based upon points for
Getting at least 1 point.
your 2-digit national number, at least for the top 100. So if
Johnny,
you make main events and you get 0 points, you basically just were in an LCQ, you know?
It won't change back where they put the point back until it costs somebody a championship. As soon as you get somebody loses the championship by a single point because they had a DNF in a race and didn't win that title, so they got 0 points, then that manufacturer is going to throw a fit and they'll change it back and they'll put the point. But for right now, all of us arguing over it, like they're going to hear it, but they're not going to care. They're just going to continue to move on. And like Mathis is a big proponent of this, as much as we all can think whatever we want about him. He was very much on his Thursday show yesterday saying, like, I have to go into A1 and talk to some people in the AMA and figure out what the hell we're doing here, because like I said, there's a big blowback from them doing this change, which is interesting because it seems kind of collective amongst everyone in the industry except for the AMA and the promoters.
Well, okay. If I'm thinking logically, if I was looking at somebody that was making this change, maybe what they're saying is they want to keep guys on the track and try to get them to finish whenever they can. Because if you have a somewhat of a bad wreck, or even if you just, like, let's say lose your front brake or something, or you lose your clutch lever, a lot of guys, factory guys, will be like, I'm not really going to do much better. I'm still going to get a point. I'm just going to phone it in and go into the pits and go for next weekend. But if you know you're going to get 0 points, well, now you have some incentive to get out there and go. Because I know first time arena cross, they were doing the road to supercross stuff where you had to qualify for night shows to get your supercross license. Well, a lot of guys would just qualify and then they wouldn't even race because they're like, boom, I got it. So then the promoters, they're like, hey, we've got less riders racing. This isn't cool. So then the next year it was, you have to finish a couple main events, you know, and then the year after that, they made it to where you have to get like some top 10s. So if I'm thinking about this, that's the only reason why that this change is really going on, is it's to keep the bikes on the track.
Yeah, I mean, it seems logical. We already have a huge attrition rate, so why would we not want someone a la Cameron McAdoo, who wads their brains out and is clearly not in the best state of mind to continue racing, to keep racing? Or even worse, you have some sort of mechanical issue that doesn't allow you to really do the jumps or the track or anything. And now instead of just pulling off and saying, well, I'm going to get either 1 point for 21st or whatever, and 1 point for 22nd, it doesn't matter. Now you keep going. So you wad your brains out again. So then our attrition rate's even higher. Like, this is a great logic. Like, we think logically at the top of this sport. I like it.
Well, in Johnny, you being new to the sport of triathlon, look at the Super League triathlon. What they do is the leader comes across a white line and they start a stopwatch. And as soon as the athlete is more than 1 minute behind the leader, you get pulled from the course. So can you imagine if every time lead
say that again? I'm not following.
So in the Super League, they'll do a swim, bike, run, swim, bike, run, swim, bike, run format. It's very short. It's very, very fast. So if I get more than a 1 minute lead on you coming across that white line, they can pull you off the course because your deficit of time, you're too far behind the leaders, and now you're becoming a detriment to the course because you're so far behind and you're kind of straggling.
So is that like checkpoint number 1 is when they start doing that?
Literally, as soon as the lead, as soon as everybody comes, like, for example, let's just start with the swim. If you're more than 1 minute behind the swim leader, you don't even get to continue on to the bike. They pull you out. So what that does is that incentivizes very, very, very close racing. Excuse me. That incentivizes a high level of quality, close racing that the people in the back, they better train their ass off to make sure that they can stay in contact with those leaders. We've seen here in the chat room where a lot of people were saying, hey, if you get lapped, get off the track, especially when, to Travis's point, when you're rolling around to just get 1 point and then you're a detriment to somebody, or you're just out there to essentially maintain. Think about it. If you got lapped, you're already in last place. So you're going to get your 1 point, or in this case,
possibly. There's
well, I was just going to say,
Carmichael's lapped up to third, So.
Well, but think about it from this standpoint. If we put in a rule that if you got lapped, so if you're obviously in last place and you get caught by the leaders, well, you just lost, in this case, no points, right? And then if you're in the next position, you get caught by the leaders, you get 1 point, but you're off the track. And what that does is that keeps to Travis's point, it reduces that risk of any potential somebody being in the way and costing somebody a championship because of a lapper. You get whatever place you're in.
A lot.
Yeah, well, and that would be the problem. If you end up being in 16th place when you finally get caught by the leaders, you get 16th place points, but you get pulled off the track. And I know it makes for less people on the racetrack. I don't want to see that, but I do concur with a lot of people in the chat room saying once the race gets kind of deep into the night, a lot of guys are just rolling the track and in the way. Get them the hell off the track. It's dangerous for the leaders. It's a distraction. What was that one race? I don't even want to screw up who the rider was. Thought he was going in.
I can think of not Mosman.
I wanted to say it doesn't matter who it was, but we all can remember somebody who got in the way of somebody, thought they were going to go to the inside, they went to the outside, or vice versa, and the pass is made. Now, I do think
I'm going to look like an idiot because my brain isn't functioning.
You're thinking Houston, whatever it was, 2021, when what was it? Wilson got in the way when Kenny and Coop were battling and cost Kenny that win.
Yep.
Yeah,
and Dean,
I don't know that I agree with the single lap thing. I've heard it thrown around of like when you go 2 laps down, and I think
would be fine.
I think that's more prevalent because like some of these races, they're lapping up to like 7th, 8th place. So do we really want to get to the last lap and we've got like 5 dudes on the track? Probably not.
No,
but
probably
Marvin.
not.
I think it happened to Marvin a couple times where Stewart got in the way because he was getting lapped when Marvin was out front, and I think Dungy passed him. That also happened in one of the.
But no, I do agree with you with Trav, whether it's 2 laps in or 3 laps in, depending on the layout of the course. But that's the type of stuff where you can look at it and go, okay, if we have a track that's 50 seconds, a track that's 52 seconds, 55 seconds, obviously, you give it a little bit more of a margin. But I mean, the consensus in the chat room is the same as ourselves. We don't want to see a lapper be, because my gosh, these are the fastest riders in the world. We're not saying that they suck by any stretch of the imagination. We just don't want them skewing the end result and we also don't want anybody to get hurt. So yeah, I just think there's got to be something that needs to be put into play there, especially at the rate of speed that these guys are going. And when there's a significant speed difference and you come barreling up on somebody on a set of whoops and they're not on a factory bike and they're not able to blitz them and they happen to get kicked sideways, and next thing you know, they're right in your path. That is avoidable to some extent. That's all we're saying.
Yeah.
Well, that's very counterintuitive to what the points are saying, where potentially the points are there to keep the bikes on the track. And then we're talking about lappers getting off the track, which yes, they, that's the funny thing about that whole thing is because from a rider's perspective, it's almost like you did all the hard work. You paid to enter. You're here to race. You're here to learn. You're here to get better. Last thing is that you want to get pulled off the track. You know what I mean? So you're going to use every time you have available to ride a track that's that gnarly and ride with the best riders in the world. It would suck
to have
keep
to charging. We want you to keep charging, right? We want to keep charging instead of just checking out.
There's the point,
and
right?
that goes to like in the chat room here. There's a guy, Matt Dixon, mentioned, hey, what if they're battling for like 18th, 19th place, which we've all seen these guys battling in the back. Well, that's fine, But like if you're battling for 18th or 19th place and getting lapped twice in a night, like bro, I'm sorry, you're just not gonna be out there. Like Mathis,
you're not going to be on the cameras, right? It's not saying that we're taking away from their ability or anything. We're just saying that the main viewers are wanting to watch the guy win. Like even if there's an epic battle for second, it's not as meaningful as if there was a battle for first. You know,
Yeah.
that's the thing. Is like they could have an epic battle and that 18th, 19th place could be the talk of the show if that same epic battle was just for first.
Well,
you know, it didn't matter if they were any faster.
How many times have we seen guys qualify and all they do is roll around? Like, I'll give you a prime example. The Hill brothers in the SMX races did not try. Like, I was at Chicago. I watched those guys literally roll around slower than I would go at that SMX race. Like, that's a waste of time. What are you doing? There's plenty of people that we could put in there. You know, and these other guys who are privateers, and we all love privateers. I mean, I sponsor them. I talk to them. I'm friends with a lot of these guys. But, like, if you're not training to try to be able to go, the full main event.
I love how the conversation turned just because if I'm thinking politics, because I always bring in politics. We went from being very right to now we're being very left, where we're like, just get the fuck off the track.
No, not at all, Johnny. What I think what this is bringing to light is, and I apologize, Bobby, if you feel like I'm always trying to smash the sport. My thing is I think, Bobby, I don't know how deep you are in the sport here and who you talk to, but we're fortunate enough where we get to talk to a lot of these riders, get to work with a lot of these riders. If you feel that what we're bringing up is about smashing the sport, please understand that what we're sharing is the people who are making the sport a reality, the people that you're watching on Saturday night.
Coach, we'll just respond to comments that
no, because Bobby brings up a good point. I'm not trying to tear the sport down. I think he's forgotten that we're fortunate enough that we're talking to the people that you're enjoying watch on Saturday night, and we're regurgitating what they tell us they don't like. But if they open their mouth, they'll get completely ostracized. So please keep that in perspective, okay? What we're talking about, going back, Johnny, you started this whole conversation.
The first one through the door is usually one that gets trampled.
That's okay. And I don't mind getting trampled on. It's the idea that we become the mouthpieces for these athletes who cannot speak up because they will be absolutely blackballed by a very strong group of promoters. You got to remember, they're in it to try to make a living. And if you open your mouth, you're going to get ostracized. What this originally started about, Johnny, was your points. So all we're saying is for the safety of the leaders, and to Travis's point about not sandbagging, like we saw with the Hills at WSX, right? Or SMX, excuse me. These guys are staying out there because they need their points. Okay, cool. You get lapped twice, like Travis said. You get taken off the track. You get your 17th place points. So the privateer still gets his points safely. I like what Travis said. He doesn't have to go 6 more laps and put himself at risk, wear his bike down, but he gets his points. We now have the leaders that, like you said, Johnny, we don't want to see 4 people left on the track. But with a little bit of math, you figure out what the lap time average is, and then you put together a number that says, okay, maybe it's a 5 lap. You get lapped 5 times because the laps are so short, then you get pulled off the track. And when you get pulled off the track, you get to retain the points position that you were in. It's safer. It makes it to where the privateers and these guys, or like you say, you have somebody, maybe a factory guy, you've got AC that's trying to keep that hand from going numb, right? So he's sitting there in 9th or 10th place. He still gets his 9th or 10th place points. You don't think AC would be like, thank God I get to get off the track and still keep my 9th place points because I can't feel my freaking arm, you know? And it just, again, it's one of those situations where we just want to see better racing and safer racing. And it is frustrating when some of the top leader guys, you know, they're in a situation where they're just trying to make a living, but they've got to work, as we're just spent 20 minutes talking about the new point system. As much as we're sitting here bench racing about it, this is affecting their paycheck. This is affecting their ability to make a living. And I don't think we could ever take that lightly.
1,000% agree with you, both of you guys, right? Where I like the idea of you get lapped, you get off the track. It's going to force better racing and whatnot. And then from there, we can decide whether or not they're going to do like I really like the Triple Crown stuff, but you guys know my view on the Triple Crown, where the third race of the night should be double points or a couple bonus points for the win, because you end up seeing that exact thing happen. Everyone knows they're getting the pit boards. They know that they're getting the podium. They know the check's going to clear. They're just riding out there to get to the finish line, get to the checkered flag. But we've been going over here. So Travis, I want to know who your top 5 for A1 is going to be. We don't even have to go into the series unless you guys want to, but 250s, 450s. Who do you think is going to be? Do you guys want to do top 3? Just make it easy. I think we do top 3.
3's fine.
Fine. I hate that word. Fine. Frustrated,
great.
irritated, nervous, and emotional. Thank you. Freaking fine goes in the gutter. Go, Travis. Top 3, 250,
Top
450.
Top 3, 450 A1. You got Ken Roxon in third. Tomac's going to get second, and Jet's just going to walk away with it.
In the chat room, I want you guys to agree, disagree. What do you guys want? Because I know the chat, I didn't have Roxon on the poll. Okay. All right. Coach, top 3, 450s.
I've got Jet, Ken Roxon, and Hunter.
Both the Honda boys. Honda boys.
And the main reason for that is Hunter looked really good, giving Jet his hands full over there in Europe. You know, if it wasn't for Jet taking out his front wheel, we may have seen a different overall over there. So haven't heard anything bad that Hunter's injured. So maybe we get a chance to see a healthy Hunter out there. And, you know, when we go to both 250s as well as 450s, my numbers are my picks are actually skewed based on who's actually been doing a lot of racing. And I just think that makes a big difference in this off season, because, you know, for some of these guys that may be going to a new platform and going to A1, and that's your first race, you know, at least Hunter's had a chance to ride the 450, not a new brand, but the bigger bike. Obviously, Kenny's been racing quite a bit. And looking at that racetrack when you did your track walk, Johnny, of course, we know that what materializes could possibly be significantly different than the layout. We know Kenny is super fast. You know, the hard one is, how do you bet against Barsha when we know that he's historically been so good there, but he's coming off of an injury? We know Tomac's a beast, but we know he's coming off of an injury. So that's why I chose those 3 guys. Is they looked very good, and I felt like Hunter, he gave Jet his what he was wanting to get, which was some close racing.
Let me tell you why Hunter won't win.
Okay, I didn't say win. I've got Jet, I've got Kenny, and then I've got Hunter for third.
So are you saying you want to rephrase that? Why Hunter won't get on the podium?
I did 1 to 3. I'm sorry, Trav. I did Jet, Kenny, and Hunter.
Oh, okay.
But finish your thought.
There was something I noticed, and Johnny, this gets more into your realm. RacerX put out a video of raw test laps at the Honda track with Dylan, Hunter, and Jet. Hunter's forks look super soft, which means he's either trying to run a softer setup or he's going slower, so the forks have to be softer. Where Jets, to me, if you look in the slow-mo, like, they don't move. They were in the whoops. And this is the big thing. It's in the whoops. Like, Jet's forks, to me, moved like this much, and Hunter's were like deep in the stroke during the slow-mo. And I'm not a suspension expert, nor am I an expert rider, as everyone knows. But I just looked at that and went, that's interesting how much softer Hunter's setup looks compared to Jet's. And Jet was absolutely crushing. Well, I mean, Jet was skipping whoops, but like every single lap in a controlled like, it was really weird to watch. Like, he was really fast.
Well, Supercross is difficult because a lot of guys are like, hey, do you want to set up for the whoops, or do you want the bike to actually be able to squat and corner? Right. So it's trying to find a happy medium. Just off the top of my head with you talking, it sounds like Jet is set up more for whoops, which could be advantageous for A1 because there's 2 big whoop sections in there. However,
well, that's why I was asking, if they're big, then that's to your advantage. If they're not, then you lose that.
Could be practicing more on the overall, hey, can I be good in the whoops, and am I going to be able to turn? Because just that. I could go on and on more about it, but that's relatively why they set up. And I'm sure we could see Hunter change his deal once they get there and they say, hey, look, whoops are actually going to be much smaller, or if a bunch of riders get together and they collectively tell the Dirtworks guys to lower them down.
Well, Johnny, I would recommend, because of you doing all these breakdowns like that, to go watch that video and maybe do some breakdowns on it. The other one I would recommend is, I can't remember whose channel it was on. It was some off channel, and sorry, I can't remember the name. There was some raw test track laps of Prado and Barsha, and I didn't think Barsha's bike looked good. Like, Prado looked okay, but it's hard to judge with Prado because, again, it's a test track and, whatever. But I didn't think Barsha's bike looked like it was set up great. It seemed to swap a lot in the whoops, and they have 2 whoop sections on that track. So might be something to look into, Johnny.
No, I'm all super interested now because of, that's the stuff that I really enjoy. So my
What's your
450
pick, Johnny?
pick is
Go for it.
Sexton is going to win. Jet's going to get second. Tomac's going to get third.
You can't be, nobody would laugh at you and say that those are silly picks. I mean, they're all legit. I know that Sexton isn't feeling really good on the KTM right now. He's still chasing a lot of setups. So I don't see, that's why I was asking, because he is on the team that's known for going over and getting the whoops cut down. So if they keep him big, I don't see Sexton being competitive. If they cut him down, I think you could certainly put him in the mix because he's not had much downtime. What makes you so high on Sexton? What have you heard? What have you seen, Johnny?
I just have a feeling, it's not that I've really been following much. It's pure speculation that I feel like he's just got a chip on his shoulder and he wants to finally prove that he deserves the number 1 plate to everybody.
Sure.
Just kind of big, giant FU finger to everybody. And so he is pretty much the underdog, I would say, in this series, even though he's the champion, as silly as that sounds. I think we can all somewhat agree with that. So on that note, 250s, West Coast Supercross. Go, Travis.
Oh boy. Well, this is so I think RJ comes out and wins on Saturday here. If you look across his results from last year, he was actually way more consistent outside of that one Triple Crown race than what we give RJ credit for. So maybe he's kind of hit that peak of consistency here for himself. So I'm going to go with RJ, and then I'm going to go with Thrasher because he's proved he's very fast, and he's been hurt for a long time. So he's coming in, as Coach said, fresher than a lot of these other guys who have been racing. And then, man, you get into third, I guess Joe. I don't know. I gotta really see what Joe looks like in full race form on this Honda. Like we saw Paris. Obviously, everyone takes Paris with a grain of salt. He looked okay. And he's like, Joe is technically my title favorite, but I think the West is a big toss-up with a lot of guys. And it's whoever can make the least amount of mistakes as far as title goes. But on Saturday night, I think we see RJ pull off the win.
Can't go wrong with those, that's for sure.
Coach?
Well, in first place, I've got Joe, mainly because I thought he looked good in Paris, and with him training with Hunter and Jet and them just coming off the 250, I think they're going to play an instrumental role with him getting set up. He's under the tutelage of Lucas Myrtle, which I think does a lot. We've talked a lot about how certain people in your camp can create confidence. I think Lucas Myrtle has kind of that Midas touch in a very positive way, because I think he puts a lot of expectations on his riders, but he also promises, you produce the results, I'll produce the results. And whether that's incremental deals with money outside of the industry. And I think Joe is very motivated, in a good headspace. The other reason why I give Joe the nod is when he smashed Deegan, because we've never seen that aggression come out of Joe. And for him to me, that was kind of like he finally made a statement that he's here. He's not afraid to bang bars. He didn't apologize for it later. And I just think that, to me, is the perfect combination for Joe. Training with Hunter and Jet on the platform that they just came off of, did well at Purse. And yeah, you could say that maybe it wasn't a very deep field over there, but I still think there was some good competition, and Joe looked decent on the bike. And then when he smashed Deegan, I think he showed that there's a momentum shift. So I'm going to give Joe the nod there. And I do agree with Trav. I was very on the fence on these next two. I'm going to go with Levi for second. I think he's got a lot to prove. New color bike. There's got to be a definitive reason why he left Star. And I think he's obviously he's training at Moto Sandbox with Sexton and with Roxon. So that, as you know, that always spills over. Championship mindset. Both guys have done extremely well, even though K-Rock hasn't won a championship here stateside, except for the outdoors, which is nothing to shut. I think we all would agree he probably could have won more had he not get hurt. So I'm going to go Levi for second, and I'm actually going to put Nate Thrasher for third, because it's either he's going to do real well or he won't be on the podium, anywhere near the podium, not even in the same zip code as the podium. But again, I think because he's been injured, he's coming in fresh. So I've got Joe, Levi, and Nate. And then for Micah, I think is his name in the chat room, my fifth place is Vince Freeze and Julian Beaumaire are my two fifth place guys. Micah.
Awesome picks, Coach. Awesome picks. But
what do
you were
think,
wrong. You were wrong.
Go ahead. Correct me, Professor.
I'm going to go with Joe Shimoda for the win.
Okay.
Then I'm actually going to go Beaumaire for second.
I think that's
and
legit.
Kitchen for third.
See, I have Beaumaire as my biggest surprise. I think he's going to surprise a lot of people, just like I had Vince Freeze for my biggest surprise, because we know he's fit, we know he's fast, we know he's ready to race, and we know he gets a good start. And looking at that, and I know we can't just put all of our merit on the layout, but if it's as tight as it looks, that's going to bode very well for Vince Freeze in that tight right-hand corner with no rear brake. Bowling ball Vince is coming in and he's clearing house.
Is Freeze riding 250 or 450?
I thought he was riding 450.
Yeah, Oldenburg is riding 250.
Yeah.
And
Vince
wait,
is on 450.
or is Vince gonna do the East Coast 250?
Well, he's listed in the 450 roster, so that's why
for these West Coast rounds. But I wouldn't be surprised if he goes little bike for East Coast.
Yep.
Yeah. While Oldenburg is racing this one, because I think Oldenburg's got the best chance for the MCR Honda to get some good finishes over there.
Yeah. Well, then in that case, I'm even more excited for East Coast, because can you imagine Vince Freeze smashing Deegan? Holy shit. You want to talk about headlines, clickbait,
dude,
everything else in between?
Or like that guy, you would hate to look at social media being that guy, because that guy gets so much heat for stuff, which love him or hate him, right? I guess it's something we need in the sport, is that stuff for sure.
You know what I love about – go ahead, Travis. Excuse me.
Well, I was having the thought the other day. I believe I was listening to the Pulp Show or something, and they were talking about back in the day how these guys like legitimately didn't like each other. And I'm like, man, or actually, no, I was talking to a buddy yesterday about it, and I'm like, man, this really sucks, because we don't have anybody anymore. Everybody wants to be kind of cool with everybody, whatever. Deegan's kind of like the closest we have to it, but even like Vince Freeze, who just goes out and smashes people, then he comes back and he's just like, oh yeah, like I wasn't really trying to do that, even though everybody already doesn't like him. Like, man, what I would give to have like a villain, whether I loved him or hated him, I would love the fact that we had that to talk about. And I really wish Deegan would fully embrace that role, kind of like how his dad was with the Metal Militia, of like, yo, I'm the bad guy, but I don't give a shit, because I'm going to come out here and I am going to smash you and I'm going to go win. So I wish we had that still, instead of everybody being all cool and everything, because it just the dichotomy of it would just be so much better for us.
I totally agree. And Trav, it's funny you say that, because what I was going to say before I interrupted you was, to me, Vince Freeze reminds me of a Bob Hanna. You're in my way. You stand between me and another $100, and I'm going to smash your face in. Kind of reminds me, remember when Bob Hanna smashed Kent Howerton? And you go back to that, that was a very public display of incredible disdain for each other. And it was cool, because you had Bob on Yamaha and you had Kent Howerton on Factory Suzuki. And you go back to the legendary, Saddleback, where Bob comes in the left-hand corner and Bob just center punches him. And Kent's not afraid to say next week, I'm going to rip your freaking head off. And these two would now it wasn't as bad as like Metasevic and Bradshaw where it's just T-bone area. This was literally, they just come in and just completely elbow the other guy off the track, and they would leave each other standing so they could keep racing. It wasn't like just clean each other out. And I totally agree with you, Trav. We need somebody that comes in. And I've even said that I believe that Vince has that attitude. And you saw it when in Paris when he's like, hey, if these guys want to come and just be friends with each other, that's great. But I'm here to race and win money because that's how I pay my bills. He took ownership of it, and he's like, if they just all want to be best friends and go have a beer, I'm paraphrasing it. But yeah, to your point, Trav, like, yep, I took him out and I'll do it again next week. And if you're in front of me, what Bob Hanna used to say, I'll break your fucking leg. Bob didn't hesitate. He's like, I'll center punch and I'll break that femur in 3 places. But like you said, Trav, either whether you love him or hate him, he was always the villain.
It's just a different world we live in right now. We let
Yeah.
people on social media do our battles for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll tell you what, if I ever get close enough to any of these coming up kids who have the skills to run up front, I would totally coach them to be the bad guy because they'll make so much more money. Like, be a media darling, but just be the bad guy. Because man, will you just cash checks? Like,
it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission, is your advice?
I mean, like, who cares really? Like, they're booing you, but still, I mean, look at all the people that booed Deegan back in the day because he was the guy that could beat Pastrana. Nobody cares now. Everybody's like, dude, that was awesome. Best time of my life. You had the good and the bad, and like they just collided, and oh man, just epic. So,
well, he owned it. He had the spikes on his.
I would coach this kid literally to own all of that. Like, be the bad guy. Own it, baby.
Well, it's funny you say that, Trav. To your point, every young kid should go watch that Brian Deegan special where he literally talked about the idea that he knew he was the hated one because Travis was the golden boy. And so what did he do? He literally built his platform on being hated with the spiked helmet and the spiked shoulders and the spiked chest protector and to Travis's point. And you go and you watch that special, and it wasn't by accident that he was hated. He wanted to be the guy that was hated.
I like how Travis just dipped out.
And you reverse engineer all that, and to Travis's point, is we know that Brian, obviously it's his son, he's grooming him to be a marketing genius, and I think he's doing a great job at such a incredibly young age. And we talked a lot about it all last year, Johnny, the idea that Hayden growing up in front of that camera has definitely not crumbled to the quote unquote pressures of being in front of a camera. If anything, he's just really blossomed into his own. And
no, it
doesn't hurt that he's fast as shit on that bike.
He's got a good set of people around him that are coaching him where that's really going to be his foundation for stuff.
But they've also invested in it as well. If you look at the different houses they've bought and you look at the different compounds that they've built and stuff like that, you really can't act surprised. It's just like the Tomacs. I mean, if you look at how John and his wife, how they essentially have groomed Eli to be a champion since day one. And, is it by accident? Of course not. You've got 2 Olympians. Eli's parents are both Olympic world champion mountain bikers. So, a lot of people don't realize this. Eli Tomac's dad, John, was one of the first people in the sport of cycling to ever make $1 million. That's huge.
I did not know that.
Yes. And I was racing against John Tomac. He was riding for Factory Mongoose. I was riding for Factory KHS in the BMX world. And John was ranked number 1, and he just left the sport. He went into this up and coming sport called mountain bikes. And everyone's like, why would you leave at the top of your game into going into an industry that doesn't even exist? John Tomac is solely responsible. Maybe not solely. There's obviously a lot of people that made it happen, but John was at the forefront of bringing in bikes, suspended mountain bikes, something that had never been seen before. The front forks being 3 inches of travel. And John went on to do extremely well and became a multi-time world champion. And he revolutionized mountain biking as we know it today. So then they have this young son, and what do? They built him a track, and they groomed him, and they rode mountain bikes together. And, John had a very successful and a very long career in mountain biking. So what has he done for Eli? Hey, this is how you extend your career. When the race season's over, you don't go do a European race for an extra $100,000. You go rejuvenate yourself by going elk hunting in the mountains for 2 or 3 weeks, and you come back and you get ready to race. And now we refer to Tomac as going into full beast mode. How cool is that? So Deegan has raised a champion. He's built, cultivated a champion. Tomacs have cultivated and raised a champion. And I think you're seeing a little bit more and more of that, where and Johnny, you and I have talked about how cool is it when you see, Max Volan's dad and his uncle. You and I both remember him racing in the 250 class. Both the Volan brothers. Remember when they went over to Europe? Well, you don't think that Max was raised to become a champion?
Yeah, it's cool to see Max getting another shot at some stuff, which
Absolutely.
arguably you might consider maybe or may not didn't deserve it because of stuff, but it's cool to see more people believe in him, and that's somebody on the West Coast that I think we should honestly look out for, because he had a couple really good these are all points.
Max is really good. He's had terrible luck, and I feel bad for the kid because he got pushed into that KTM. Like no matter what anybody's saying publicly, behind the scenes, we all know he got pushed into that KTM deal because KTM was trying to fill a 250 seat and they had no one. So
well, now he's going to be on Mitch Payton, who might have a little bit better direction per se.
Yeah. Well, think about this, Trav. If you go back a little bit with Max, that year before, his dad took him over to Europe. Remember, he was running the 125 class in the MX2Ps?
Yeah, the EMX series. Yeah.
The EMX series. And then they bring him over here. And I remember being at Loretta's because I was working with Logan Best at the time. And in the Super Mini class, it was Daxton Bennett, Hayden Deegan, Casey Cochran, and Logan Best, top 4 duking it out in Super Mini class. And I remember watching Max Volan. And he's 9 feet tall, right? He's so easy to find on the track. And I remember he's racing in the schoolboy class, and I think he gets like a 9th or a 10th place start. And just watching him never, because he's got such long legs, and he just never sat down anywhere, and just literally never looked like he was in panic mode, just worked his way right to the front. And then I remember hearing he got plucked out of that and got put right into that 250 factory KTM ride. And I know that he did not want to go there, but I guess the KTM offer was incredibly lucrative. And if you guys remember, it was a 4-year deal, which at the time, think about it. If you want some guaranteed money and you sign a 4-year deal, that's pretty impressive.
I thought it was 3.
Was it 3? I know it was longer than usual.
Yeah, because I think he's been in the class 3 years. So I think it was a 3-year deal because they wanted to give him the normal 2. And then they ended up giving him 3, which is why his dad allowed him to move up when he did, because he was supposed to go another year at EMX or something. Like he was going to do, I believe, the full series that year when he went pro for that team. But then they gave him that lucrative 3-year deal because his dad was like, we need an extra year to develop since this wasn't the plan anyway. And that's why he went. And obviously,
I want you to think about
struggle street, but I think he's underrated, to be honest with you. He's good.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think anybody can manual a motorcycle like a mountain bike like he can. He's just unbelievable, the stuff that he can do. He's very, very creative. I just don't think he ever really gelled with that 250 chassis over at KTM. So I'm excited to see what he can do at Cowie. And Trav, we were just talking about how like the Tomacs being multi-time world champion mountain bike racers and Olympians, and both his mom and dad, John and Kathy, how they literally cultivated an environment where Eli was on the fast track to becoming a champion. We were saying the same thing with Deegan, right? He knew what was necessary. And I love the interview that he did with Chase. He said, we did a lot of different things and we're just hoping it was the right combination of things, but only time will tell if it was. A little bit of mountain bikes, scooters, being in a pump track, like Brian said, we just did a lot of different things. Think about what you were just saying right there. Because of Max's dad and his uncle's experience with contracts, both internationally and domestically, they were able to get that 3rd year on a contract. That's where I love to hear those types of conversations, because they didn't want him to go there, but that is quite an offer that had come around. And is in hindsight, I would be very interested to talk to Max's dad. In hindsight, do they think it was a good move for his career? Because a lot of people said, hey, if you can't win at KTM, you can't win anywhere, right? Now, thankfully, Mitch has given him a chance. We'll see, because that's an environment that I think is, Mitch is a no BS kind of a guy. But I think if you look at how cool, Mitch Payton is, if you go back and you look at all the stories, anybody, whether you go and you listen to somebody that's talked about working with Mitch or working for Mitch or riding for Mitch, they all say the same thing. Mitch Payton is loyal to the core. Remember when Brock Tickle was promised a 450 ride and Cowie didn't give it to him? So he put a 450 at the back of his trailer and he built a 450 for Brock to go race. That's the kind of man that Mitch Payton is. And I think
he does
when
that
you
with
take
Forkner?
I don't think he's going to have a. I was going to say I don't think he has a choice, but we all know that that's in his contract stipulation somewhere. So maybe Cowie, if he doesn't produce this year, I don't think it's a surprise to anybody that this will probably be one and done, and then he'll get some opportunity to leverage that clause somewhere. Whether it may be over at Team Tedder, you never know where it's going to end up, right?
Do you think so? Do you think Forkner is going to go 450 outdoor, or he's going to race 250 all year this year?
He'll do 250 all, but if he doesn't produce, his contract still states that he gets a 450 opportunity somewhere before he's done. So it'll be 250 this year. He'll run it as long as he can.
So he's going to ride 250 all year. AC's contract's up after this year. Then do you think that if we all know AC's got arm issues, and who knows, I've heard it's still not like a whole lot better. It might be slightly better. But if AC doesn't produce this year, do you think he gets shuffled to put Forkner on that bike to fulfill that contract? Because at some point here, if AC's running around in like 8th, 9th place, which is fine, that's still a great rider and a great secondary rider, but he's obviously not going to get paid. When do you think they shuffle him off of the team? Is this the point? Like next year, like AC doesn't produce this year, he runs around between like say 8th to 11th all year, finishes the year, but runs around 8th to 11th. Do they shuffle him off, put Forkner on for a 1-year deal and say, well, here you go, kid, we're fulfilling the contract? Or do they keep it and then make Mitch put him on a 450 out of the back of the PC truck? Like, what do you think happens there?
The big question is, if AC is not the number one guy and Anderson only signed a 1-year deal, who's the key ringer at Cowie on a 450?
I heard Anderson's a 2-year deal. I heard he's got 2 more years here.
Oh, I beg your pardon. You're right, because I was surprised because I thought he would sign a 1-year deal and go over to Triumph. And you're exactly right. With that being a 2-year deal, that kind of nixes the idea that I thought that he'd be going over to Bobby at Triumph on a 450. Let's just say that Jason lights the world up this year like we know he's capable of. Then he becomes the main man. Then, yes, I can see them putting him in kind of like a Villapoto, Jake Weimer situation. You have your AA big guy, and then you've got a good – Jake Weimer is a really good tester. He's a good teammate. Yeah, I could see Forkner getting over there, checks the box, and he's in, he's out. But the big thing is going to be whether or not Cowie's got one of their big heavy ringers at the top, because that's what we haven't seen out of Cowie. If you go back, it was Tomac was the ringer. Before that, say Villapoto was the ringer. Before that was Stewart was the ringer. We haven't seen that in the last 2 years out of Cowie just because of AC's injury. I don't know, because correct me if I'm wrong, didn't AC's contract just come up this year, or is he on the second of the 2 years?
I think he's on his second of the 2 years, because I believe I was listening to something, and I don't know where the other day, and they were talking about it, that he was done after this year, because they were talking about how, like, where would he go? Or maybe we were talking about it on my show. I don't remember. But we were talking about where would he go, like, if he didn't perform this year? Because again, with that arm situation, I mean, yeah, he's still a great rider. I mean, you're getting like top 10 in the 450 class with one arm. So, and I don't know about you, but as soon as my arms pump up, I pull off the track. Like, I'm not going to continue to ride if either arm pumps up, let alone both, whatever. And so for him to be doing what he's doing is just absolutely incredible.
Well,
but at
you
the same
lose
time, too, we all know.
fingers, so you're not using your clutch or your front brake. You stop. And most of your braking power is with your front, So if you can't feel that, then you're slowing down considerably.
Yeah.
Hey, there's a question that just got put in the chat room. I think is a good one. Who podiums first? Triumph, Beta, etc. from Guyland. Assuming the bikes get up there.
Triumph outdoors. Joey Savacci.
There you go, Guy. You got it.
I don't see Swole or Little Red Dog doing literally anything in Supercross. Like Swole is one of those guys that like wherever he starts is where he's gonna be. So he's kind of like Kitchen. Now Kitchen's on a bike that can get starts. Maybe Swole can get a start, but again, we're on an unproven chassis.
That's my
with
question.
literally no data to go off of. So maybe that bike is a whole shot machine and he yanks starts and finishes on the box the whole Supercross season, and I look stupid. But if that's not the case, he's again, great rider, but does not have the speed to go through these guys. And especially if you get on the East, if Deegan is healthy and racing East, like, he's not touching him. I'm just sorry. Deegan is the class of the field when it comes to East Coast Supercross there. And Little Red Dog, I mean, we've all seen his struggles the last 2 years in the amateur ranks, and part of that is because he's been riding the Triumph bike, but then when he goes to these public races, he couldn't ride it, so now he's jumping on a Yamaha, which he's got no testing time on. So it's like this whole back and forth thing there, but it's still one of those situations of, I just don't think it's going to be great, and his dad was on Pulp the other night, and he didn't really instill a ton of confidence in me that it was like really going to go well. And my question is too, is like, he's supposed to race East. What if he doesn't get enough points running the futures race at A2 to then, which
is realistic.
Yeah.
Which is realistic.
Yeah. Cause all it takes is like a start crash from him at the A2 futures race or whatever they're calling it now. And he doesn't get the points and he can't ride Supercross the next week. Or technically he's not supposed to. Now, whether they fulfill that, again, we all know it's more like guidelines than actual rules, so whatever. But there's a lot of question marks with that. And like the Triumph thing, what do you guys think about Triumph literally not racing West Coast where all the lights are here to start the season?
Well, I think that's only because their compound is at Matt Walker's old place on the East Coast. I think it's just a logistical issue. And you think about it, you know, they've been testing exclusively on the East Coast. So the dirt type's, I think, a little bit more conducive. I think that's the only reason why.
I mean, my thought process, and I did a whole video on this, is I just think it's a huge marketing miss. I mean, you're debuting a new bike.
For sure.
Yeah,
you're debuting a new bike, which you're not even importing. Like, here's the thing. Those bikes are going to sell out, and everybody's going to be like, oh, they're rare. Because I found out they're only importing like 12 to 1,300 bikes to the U.S., and that includes bikes that they have to give out to, say, like Ricky or Stanton or those guys. And how many bikes are those guys getting? 2 or 3?
In order for them to race.
Yeah. So it's like, so they're only going to import that many. They're not going to make much money on that, obviously. And so, yeah, there will be a little bit of built-in, like, oh, they're rare this year. But at the same time, it's like, I don't understand. We all know they don't have a 450. And Savachi can ride the 450 class on the 250, whether he does well or not. Why would you not drive him out west and let him run the first 4 rounds of West Coast 450 Supercross to at least premiere the bike? Like, put a tested, proven winner, like Supercross winner, on the bike at a race where all the lights are, and because he'll qualify. Like, I have a hard time believing that even on that 250, Joey doesn't qualify for the 450 mix.
Well, it just means that they're probably not ready. You know, they're weighing the options and the guys are going,
Bingo. That's the big thing. I think they're behind. And what this logically leads to me, as Coach would say, is if we're reading the tea leaves, the bike's behind in development. That's all there is to it. Which
is crazy because we saw what
the East Coast is going to be.
What Kenny did with the Suzuki. They were able to just basically ramp it back up to, but again, they could just.
Yeah, but you're talking about K-Rock. I think he can make a Hodaka or a Can-Am work.
I know, but win is the thing.
Kenny could ride that beta and win. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
I don't think he could win. He needs to have decent equipment under him, but he can definitely
race
be
on a 2012
top 5.
Suzuki last year.
No, it was not a 2012. That's what I'm saying, is that bike is completely different. Yeah, sure. It is a supposedly 2012, but I'm sure it's all about the testing and the things that they had on there for him in order to feel comfortable and have that bike work incredibly well. You know, it was nowhere near a 2012 Suzuki.
Well, look at how many suspension companies he went through on that Suzuki before he finally settled in.
Exactly. I do agree with you guys. That's not ready. And I don't mean to be a stickler or a bearer of bad news, but we've gone over by about 40 minutes because we always do when freaking Travis is on here. And
I like to talk. I don't know what to say. Look, you guys can leave. I'll just keep rolling this.
I'll just leave it
Fine.
live. I'll just do a 12-hour live stream. Can you just talk for 12 hours, Travis?
Sure, no problem.
And the link is in the description for his YouTube channel. So if you want to hear more Travis and more Coach, it's always at the bottom so you guys can follow their stuff, because they bring just a different viewpoint to the sport to ultimately help grow. Yes, there is a lot of, we talk about some sensitive stuff, but we're trying to talk about sensitive stuff in a lighthearted matter where it's not putting blame on anything. It's more of a solution-based conversation rather than just pointing fingers at everything. So I want to say I appreciate both you guys for continuing to come on this, and I've got big plans to have this grow over the next year here. So as always, appreciate not only the panel, but all the community for helping with ideas, joining the chat. Make sure on your way out, you hit that like button. And while you're at it, why not hit the subscribe button? You can always unsubscribe later. So till next time, guys, keep it WFO.
Thanks, guys.